Hi.
So I'm like, Venus is already pretty much standing still, isn't she? She's definitely like
She's 12, right? Yeah, she's just
yeah. So she's gonna be she's turning retrograde, I think, officially on Saturday. Is it Saturday? It is Saturday, yeah. Yep. Yeah, so
I will take
fun Venus
Goodbye.
retrograde personal story. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was saying
So,
I have a very visible Venus. And Venus is left the room, and Venus does not want us to record this. Venus is like checked out. No one look at me.
the minute we mentioned the awkward middle school bangs, she got offended. And for everybody that is watching this, that's a preview. We will talk about the awkward middle school bangs and how they relate to Venus retrograde shortly. By the way, this is AMA. This is Ask Me Astros. I'm Crystal Lynn. This is CB Henriette. We're going to go through a chart today, specifically looking at the topic of Venus retrograde, which affects everybody. And we're going to go through a specific chart example and answer a question that was super relevant to it. So you'll get to see how two really different astrologers work on the same question.
Yes, you will. Woo. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, so what I was saying was, first of all, so my Venus is going through my perfected 10th house of Leo this year.
Okay.
And she rules my 7th house of marriage and partnerships. And it also so happens that she rules like my partner's 10th house. And it is like, she's really important for both of us right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, we have two options with Venus retrograde coming up. We can proactively work on our relationship, or we can reactively work on our relationship. So we actually looked into, because we're both going through some individual stuff right now.
Yeah.
So it's really important to us to learn how to support each other, but also how to like hold ourselves up and not over support, you know? So we decided to look into couples therapy to be able to do like preventional medicine in a sense.
Nice.
And I was like, it's going to happen by the time Venus starts retrograde. If it's supposed to be the right thing, we'll get one by the time Venus starts retrograde. And the therapist has just been like not responding because they're so busy. And then they said, I opened up more slots. Can you do Friday? I'm like, Venus's day, the day before she goes retrograde. Of course we can. So
that's
yeah,
so good.
right?
Venus
It was like
on
so
your side.
Yeah, which is great. I'm working on my relationship with Venus. I have a Venus talisman, even though my personal Venus isn't so great.
Yeah.
And I buried the talisman in the roots of an abundance plant.
Okay.
So that it could grow and bring abundance and all that stuff. And recently that plant has not been doing so well because it's grown so much.
Yeah.
It outgrew its pot. So my partner and I we got a larger pot. I did a very like sketchy election for last week, and we repotted the plant into a bigger plant, like literally held hands and put the plant in together to symbolically represent the whole Venus thing. Yeah, it was cute. It was fun. So
I love that. Is that a talisman you made?
Yeah, it was one of my masterpieces when I was studying with Warnock. So it was this Venus moon face talisman, like very niche. And it was such a uncommon election. He actually made a paper talisman of it. It was in 2020. So like, not many solid talismans were made that year.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Man, speaking of talismans and magicians we like a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Every time I say the word magician, I think of I'm gonna forget the name of the TV show with the banana stand and the
Yeah, you've said that. So I've never watched the TV show, but you've mentioned it in front of me a couple times with the banana stand. I should know it by now. But I don't.
Anyways, if anyone knows what I'm getting, you're gonna laugh at the visual and you're here for it. At any rate, I had a reading I was telling you before we started with Eric Purdue last night, which was like, for those who don't know, Eric Purdue is just a
classy, wonderful person.
Yes, has been a practicing like magic person. I don't know what people call themselves for like 30 plus years in a Santeria practice. But most famously has translated the Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy from the Latin. And you can get a reading with him. Just who knew? And it was like, for thinking about the Venus retrograde, because I like our person we're going over. Venus is in my 10th house. She's going through my first. So I've been thinking a lot about my relationship to what's important to me, these things. And it was a really nice reading. It was this specific reading where he goes through and he gives you the names and draws sigils for your good diamond and your evil diamond. And it was just a really lovely reading to like enter this Venus retrograde. It gave me a lot to work with, which is just nice for people to think about. Like it could be a good time to really like get some sort of reading as you dive in.
Yeah, and he's so grounding. You know, when I attended his talk at NORWAC this year, which was about the good and the bad diamond.
Yes.
And it was just like, oh, because he's one of those people, he can take a really complicated thing and then just say it. And you're like, oh, it's normal. It's like, you just made this calculus sound like 2 + 2. I get it now. So,
yeah, he's one of those rare people that has just like you said, such crazy knowledge and also can like talk about the spirit world in a way that just sounds completely normal, like every day. Like sometimes even, you know, we're in this world, but sometimes you talk to people and it gets a little out there.
Sometimes people get really intense and focused. And then sometimes people are like, no, the world is magic. We're doing magic all the time. Every day we're like, it's real stuff. Accept it. I prefer that vibe. That's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah.
So I always really appreciate it.
Totally. Yeah. So with that, should we jump into our
I know we had some tech issues to start, so a little bit less socializing at the beginning might be called for, just so we can jump into the good stuff.
As if anyone was here, you were watching me desperately go on my my computer trying to figure out how to record this session because we are unsure if StreamYard is actually doing so.
Yeah. Okay. And another shout out to Kayla for sitting with us through that process.
Yes. And understanding it's a case of the Mondays. Okay. Lord, let's see if I can do this. Canva. You're all awkwardly watching my screen. Okay.
We're actually just seeing you right now. So, and it's perfectly showing the screen. It's all great. We just got to go back a couple slides.
Okay, cool. Yep. Thank you. I can't see my face and I'm okay with that.
I can, and it looks amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. View stream. Okay. You know, but can you see, are you seeing my whole computer or just the screen?
Nope. We're seeing the slideshow. We're all set.
Fantastic. Okay. So this is us. Hello. We did that already.
Yep. Cool.
Do you want to read this?
Yeah, sure.
Week's question. Okay.
Okay. So this week's question came beautifully thought out. Venus, the ruler of my sun sign Taurus in the 10th house, will be retrograding across my ascendant in Leo for the next few months. My natal Venus is in Gemini. I recently changed careers and have been putting myself out there as it relates to my new vocation. But this Venus retrograde feels very personal to me, almost as if I should go into a cave, take a vow of silence, and ride out the retrograde hermit-style until September. Should I actually do this, or do you have better advice for how to handle the Venus retrograde? I love this.
I do too. My hot take is yes and no.
Yeah, it's a yes and situation. It's a you can have both situation.
It's a sort of situation. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, good. I did put the chart next. I love it when I remember to put the slides in order.
Yeah, no, it's really cool slideshow, CV.
Thank you. Thank you, Canva. So, let's dip into Dick. Whoa. Wow.
Let's dive in. Can we dive, please?
Hi, Venus.
I prefer if we dive in.
Me too. Thank you. Hello, Venus. Not a Mercury retrograde, I swear.
I'm broken. I'm sorry.
Let's dive into the natal promise, shall we?
Thank you, Kayla.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, let's dive into this chart for Venus retrograde and to answer this question. CV, do you want to lead?
Actually, I'm going to see my face so I can see myself. Yes. So, okay. We're looking. Actually, I'm not because that's distracting. Sorry, everyone in TV world. Okay. So first things we want to see. Okay. So we know she's Leo rising, as she said, right? Her chart is ruled by the sun, which is in Taurus with the North Node in the midheaven. So it's a very angular, loud sun ruled by a Venus, right? So yeah, we see that the first thing that comes to mind, I'll kind of dig into this, was just thinking about the retrograde, is that the Venuses, and we'll get into it, the Kazemi moment is going to happen like around her ascendant. So that's when Venus like gets purified in the heart of the sun. I believe that's at 20 degrees. And then we know that she's going to station direct at 12 degrees, so pretty close to her midheaven. So yeah, there is something here, just looking at those two pieces of information, if we think about the retrograde, that speaks to the fact that this could be a time for her to have some maybe revelations about what she wants, right? Like who she is, maybe some like psychological insights related to Venus things that will ultimately impact her career public persona.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also important to think like when we talk about the 10th house, definitely career and vocation, really spot on with the personal interpretation here for this person. But it's also life path, life direction, what we're drawn to. I like to compare the 10th house to like on a compass, that's our north. Yeah. It's one of the things we look to for what is this person as a soul here to accomplish. Now, especially when we look at whole sign, you can split the life direction thing up into multiple ways, which would include, does the MC actually fall in the 10th whole sign house? It does here. Sometimes we look at the North Node to see what we're really pulling in and like what's really emphasized in life. It is also there in this one. So again, this is someone that I would ask them in a consultation. Are you like very instinctually drawn to the things that support you, that feel good, that are right for you? And do you sometimes question that because you see the world emphasizing how much of a struggle it should be to find purpose? Because this person has everything saying me, purpose, same thing. And also, you know, the support from, if we go out a step further, Venus being in the 11th house of Gemini, that might lead someone to question too, just because they get so many ideas. You know, Venus is a very Gemini Venus. Yeah. Talking to all of these life direction things. So I have a lot of options. Maybe I'm a Renaissance kind of person, or a Jack or a Jane of all trades. And so that might lead to wanting some variety, but also really needing that sort of, I know what my next step is. I know what my plan is, what my 5-year or 10-year goals are. So I can see how that would bring in some sort of like, should I, shouldn't I thing. But I do trust this person's instincts a lot based on their chart, even diving into that really fine exalted Jupiter in the 12th.
Yeah. Yes. Man, because we've both spent time with this chart, so it's easy. Like I want to like dig in and go into all the things, but I'm going to add something to the story thinking about as well. If we're thinking about the retrograde cycle, and as you pointed out, this person is not in a Venus perfection year. So I mean, while this Venus retrograde is going to be important, maybe it's definitely not the only thing.
Yeah, it's not noticeable, but it's not dragging you along. I mean, it is noticeable because it's angular, but it's not dragging you along.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to point out, though, that what is perfected this year is that 9th house with Saturn and Aries making this opposition to the moon and Mars, which is sort of a difficult configuration. And we know that after this Venus retrograde, before their next birthday, there's going to be a 1 eclipse in this part of the chart. So it's almost like this Venus retrograde is preparing her for like the changes along this 9th house axis. And it's interesting, something that we know about this person is that if I looked at this chart, I'd say, wow, I bet this person has a really public career. But up until this point in their life, they really haven't, but they're gearing towards that. And so I think that we're talking about Venus retrograde, but I'm really thinking that like Saturn, Aries, Mars, that whole situation is actually going to come into play here in a certain way as well.
Yeah. And then thinking about what is Mars up to currently, Mars just got into, actually Mars just left the 1st house. So that pressure may have eased since Mars kind of got out of the 1st house, which was only last week. And now this person may be focusing on maybe not as much, or at least 2nd house themes, which might even be a lot of people, if we're on like threads and social media and stuff right now, they're talking about how Mars in Virgo is like panic cleaning, or, you know, getting really efficient with things around the house. In this case, it might be getting really efficient with the budget. I remember I did have the opportunity to consult with this person beforehand, which to anybody watching, you don't have to have a consultation with us first to have us talk to you on AMA. This is a unique case, but this is someone that we talked about. How can you make sure you have the resources to have the freedom of choice? So go in and look at your resources, make sure they support you for as long as you feel comfortable, so that you have the freedom of choice without the pressure of finances.
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of build, I'm sorry.
I was saying her Venus would probably appreciate that too.
Oh yeah. And, you know, just to sort of bring out two things. I think maybe if this person has spent their whole life, we know this, like kind of, I feel like in a very like Saturn, just to like pinpoint one signature, talk about like very like Saturn Aries. Like this is someone who had a very high power job, worked a lot, had almost feels like, you know, you can really kind of see this, sort of have spent their life trying to just, again, working a lot, like being really busy. And now they've moved into a career that is more public, but it also gives them, they're self-directed. They're an entrepreneur now. They're working on art, right? And I think that that itself is a little difficult because they're used to being busy all the time. And so I would caution this person. We know that Mars is in your second, but also Venus is retrograde, which is a kind of time, we'll get to it, for introspection and maybe slowing down. So it might be counterintuitive, but I would really watch and try to ground yourself, because that Mars in Virgo might have you just wanting to make big decisions right now when it's really not the time to do it.
Yeah, I'm pulling up some more timing techniques here so I can double check on some stuff.
Please.
Because I agree with everything you're saying. And I'm just like, am I missing something? Is, you know, like, is Venus talking and we're not hearing her? And that's another thing that I think intuitively I'm feeling like might be a thing of like listening to yourself. And I've been feeling this a lot for the energy of Venus and Leo, especially with Venus transiting the first house, which a lot of people who are important in my life, and as of this weekend, I'm pretty sure even one of my dogs are Leo rising. So I rectified my dog's chart this weekend. But anyway, this is Venus saying, what's the conversation with yourself? What's the level of acceptance with yourself kind of situation when she's going through that first house, especially if she rules the 10th, which she would for a Leo rising, right? Yep. She's saying like, I get all that stuff. I'm bringing that here. Does that jive with what we're talking about? What's your relationship with you? Forget the other people for a second. How do you relate to you, so that then we can carry that out to the public and say, this is who I am. So I think one of the things we had talked about when we were going over notes before this was the question asks, should I be a hermit? And we were like, hermit and go into a cave and stay in solitude, or pull kind of an eat, pray, love and just go and experience all the things without having to do it in order to serve a particular function or calling, or what's it called when you support a movement, you know, like a certain purpose. Just go experience the world and let purpose find you a little bit, instead of saying I need to fixate on this specific purpose, and make sure like everything I do contributes to that. Because again, one of the things we're also seeing here is they're just coming out of, literally today, as the nodes do shift from Taurus into Aries, this was their nodal return.
Yeah, it was their nodal return, and they are gearing up for their second Saturn return in a few years, right? They just had Saturn on an angle.
So, yeah, this is a lot of like the opportunity to feel yourself out again and like get to know yourself a little better.
Yeah, you know, you're interesting. You're saying this. May I move slides for a moment?
Oh, sure.
Because I'm just gonna flip around here for a minute. I get some questions. Okay. Yeah. So thinking about this, and made me, when you said eat, pray, love, right? We know that technically it's a thing. They're like, should I be a hermit for a few months? And to be clear, Venus retrograde is approximately 40 days and 40 nights. So it's not like months on end, right? It's a doable period of time. And, you know, considering that Mars in Virgo, yeah, maybe during this 40 days and 40 nights, you're not necessarily, I mean, if you have the means to like, you know, actually like go to India or Hawaii or something and have like an eat, pray, love or whatever it is you want to go, that's cool. You do you. But it could also just be like reading books you like really like experimenting, giving yourself space to just like make art or whatever it is, that feels like a way for you to get in touch with who you are. Because when I think about this period, I think the beautiful part of the retrograde is it's almost like, we know that Venus disappears from the sky, or well, appears to, she doesn't actually. And it's almost like this invitation to slow down, which is really beautiful. So coming back to the hermit thing, it's like, you know, you don't have to be, I wouldn't necessarily put everything you do like on broadcast, but it can be a lovely time to like actively investigate. Ask yourself questions. What do I love? Who do I love? Do I still love these things? Is there something or someone I've overlooked? This can be pulling in from Austin Coppock, who's numerous things I've listened to on Venus RX already this month, this can be a really important time to wrestle with our desires, to think about like maybe there are things that I just took for granted that I like that I no longer like, and maybe there are things that I thought I didn't like but I actually do like.
Yeah, I totally agree with that in so many ways. I also just noticed that in another timing technique called zodiacal releasing, which a lot of people have heard of, but again, it's just a timing technique. This person is coming into a peak period of the 7th sign from fortune in Leo during this retrograde. So on the 28th, there may be this shift of activity increasing, particularly in Leo situations. And when it comes to your fortune, so it's fortune would be like the things that support you in life tangibly.
Yeah.
So we're thinking about wealth and resources and your health, wealth, and resources kind of stuff. There may be an increase of that kind of stuff that really does contribute to the quality of your life and the sense of direction that you have and the connections that you feel like making. So it is just a more active time of life for reflection at this point. And this is from anybody who is into zodiacal releasing. I did release from the Lot of Spirit on this one. So it's a level 2 Leo peak from the Lot of Spirit. I know this person happens to be reading through Valens. So when you get to book 4, you'll see a lot more about this.
Sorry, I'm trying to like switch this up so we don't. I was actually going to take the okay, we're good. Okay, cool. I didn't remove. Sorry, I'm still struggling with this. How do I move things? Okay. Sorry for awkwardness. I'm going to switch slides, which is the okay. So we've talked a bit. We've talked a lot about what this person might expect during this retrograde. Should we step back for a moment and as I switch sides here, hopefully it works. Should we step back for a moment and think about explain what this retrograde is, period? Okay. I apologize. Screen look good to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're on the Kazemi slide, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Or you know what? Do we want to start with as we answer this before we start going with more questions? Should we go back to the Demetra? So that might be a good introduction to
the Demetra quote. Yeah. So this is Demetra talking on retrograde in general. So this kind of applies to just any retrograde planet. And then we think about those applications to the archetype of Venus on top of it. So,
and I apologize, everyone. I'm like,
well, as you're navigating to the slide, I can let people know this is actually from Demetra's first book, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, Volume 1. It looks like this. It's hard to get on Amazon right now, so I would Google it and maybe find a copy on eBay. Try to get as new as possible just because it'll last you longer and you will refer to it a lot. It's like an encyclopedia for everything. My style is to go into Demetra, find what I'm looking for, see who she cites, and then go back to the source texts from there. But she did a really good job encapsulating it, so I'm just going to stick to her for this this presentation. And as you can see, this is volume 1, 267 to 262, 268. It actually does turn the page a little bit for part of it. Oh,
before you do that, Crystalline. Yeah. So I shared this excerpt because I think like I didn't want to overwhelm people with slides, but I feel like the whole quote is definitely worth reading. Would you mind reading the whole thing?
Yeah. So bear with me. I have no problem reading the whole thing. Okay, so Hellenistic and medieval astrologers considered a retrograde planet moving extremely slowly and backwards, which is what retrograde does, to be a problematic condition. Paulus says that when planets are retracing their paths, their influences are useless, unfavorable for action, and insignificant. Dorotheus writes that a planet in retrograde motion signifies difficulty and misfortune in the native and others. Ibn Saul relates that a retrograde planet signifies disobedience, contradiction, and diversity or discord. The rebellious quality can be seen in the erratic visual movement of its retrograde loop, speeding up at the opposition and pushing the envelope as it moves beyond the normative boundaries of the ecliptic. For this case, we're not looking at the opposition. So if you're like, Venus can't oppose the sun, you are correct. You'll have elongation. Opposition is for the outer planets. Actually, the Greek word used for retrograde is, I'm going to butcher this, but it's anapodizo. which means to step or go back, or to call back, or to recall. And Robert Schmidt, who was part of Project Hindsight in the 90s, suggests that retrograde benefic planets take what good they have given or take back what good they have given.
Yeah.
And retrograde malefic planets don't give over any good in the first place. And then the paragraph that you're citing there is, you skip a paragraph and we see that we might then say that a retrograde planet is not only moving very slowly toward its goals, but it's going backwards or in the opposite direction of accomplishing its objective. There exists some kind of hindrance or obstruction that inhibits the expression of its significations, or which provokes rebelliousness against the norms or consensus behavior. One thing that just occurred to me is an interesting Venus retrograde story that's unfolding is the writers and actors strike.
Yes. Go. I will let you just dive into detail for a moment.
Yeah. So what we're looking at with a Venus retrograde, to take all of that and say, basically this last paragraph is the takeaway, right? Yeah. All of that was what the authors have said, and they tend to be a little bit hard on it, right? They're like, it's moving backwards. Nothing's going to go right. Everything's going to go wrong. And if you're thinking about like, I'm going on a voyage and something very tangible rather than abstract, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily set out to start something during a Venus retrograde. As you can see with my example at the beginning, my partner and I are going to counseling as a sort of remediation or Venus retrograde charity, because we're understanding that relationship needs to go inwards, needs to take steps back, needs to reflect on itself, and needs to redefine itself in this time. So the writer's strike, the detail there is that these people are saying our art, very Venusian, and the relationship and the value put into the relationships. One of the things we've been saying for months on our coffee talks is Venus retrograde is everyone being seen and understood and heard in the relationship, and what compromises need to be made for both people to have a win in order for the relationship to continue. Yeah. When you don't have that, when you have discord, disconnection, retrograde things, this is one of the ways that that can express. There is not equity, equality, or fairness in this relationship. We are going to do what we need to do to ensure that it happens. And that is where potentially this writers and actors strike is saying, hey, Hollywood execs and CEOs, see us. We need to be seen. We're not having our fair share. All of those things. Here's how we're going to see how that works out. So I would be curious to see how this unfolds. If there's any new event that starts this weekend, you know, it got really big over last weekend as Venus started slowing down even more to a standstill. What's going to unfold between especially this coming Saturday, the 22nd of July, and September 3rd? And then how does that maybe get us rolling or send us into a new normal come September 3rd, particularly through October 8th, which is when Venus covers those degrees for the final time and lays it all to ground.
Absolutely. Yes. And kind of when you're talking, I was thinking about like how we can relate this more into a mundane way in our own lives. This idea that going back and Venus saying this isn't fair. Like we think the idea of a retrograde too, is this movement from evening star to morning star. In the middle, we have this Kazemi moment where we could say the impurities are burned off and we get to start again. And so thinking about like the writer's strike and this idea that like, this isn't fair. We can't move forward until this is resolved. And I think people see that in their own lives, like already with the shadow, right? Most of us, this has been a heavy shadow period. Most of us know what story we're working in. I've seen people come in and they're like, oh my God, like this like old, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend or whatever is like coming back into my life. And I'm scared they were the one. And it's like, this isn't the time I would say, you know, mostly to jump into things. It would be a time to ask us, well, do I need closure? Is that what needs to happen? Right? Whatever that looks like. Maybe it's we need closure so we can start again. I don't know. But like there's something here. It can get really messy. And I really want to like invite people to think about that. The example I gave you is I had someone, a client who's like life coach or sort of business coach kind of bullied them into starting a TikTok during this Venus shadow period. Yeah. And like they had one video and it went like their work was like, why are you doing this? And like they were kind of skittish, and to be fair. And so maybe like this isn't the time to like launch a social media campaign, like you said, or something, or maybe if you're getting into a relationship, maybe take it slow.
Yeah. See where it leads. It's a time to explore. And again, this is a time to let things not be permanent.
Yes. Perfect.
Because, this is a time where dating might be a good idea.
Yep.
Committing to a relationship might not be the right time. And that's, of course, archetypal, metaphorical. Follow your own intuition because you're going to get the experience out of it that you need. But my first thing is, I would normally say, trust your intuition, trust your instincts. But if you are questioning your intuition and your instincts, that's also an intuition. So I know I have a client that is coming to me, I think today we'll be talking, and they're just like, I've decided to do this, but I'm not sure if I'm hiding or if I'm following my intuition. So this is a time to, again, let yourself feel that out and give yourself time. You don't have to figure everything out today. We have time for this. And in fact, we can track that we have plenty of time for this, literally 40 days and 40 nights. So, go for a wander in the proverbial desert and see how it goes. Or, ride out the proverbial flood, whichever one you want to use.
That's my favorite thing about Venus retrograde, actually. Like, people often think they come in, especially I think Venus has disappeared from the sky, which makes me think she's also like louder in a sense, right? And so people oftentimes come in for consultations and they're just like, I need answers now. Like, I'm not happy. What do I do? And I think that this is actually a really beautiful time because we get to say no. You have 40 days and 40 nights where you actually don't have to make a decision, right? With this, like, to bring it back to our client that we're using today, or our example rather, this person, we know that they're going to, right, they're in a 9th house cadent year, as you mentioned before. They're going to move, next year into a 10th house year. We can see that there's a lot of activity that's going to be coming up for this person, but this is a really cool opportunity for them and for a lot of us to really just like experiment and play around so that when it does get busy, we can go forward with confidence.
Yeah. And even to build on that, I looked at their secondary progressed moon, and they're in a gibbous phase right now. So they're coming into even more energy and recognition and reflection in their lives. It's going to be a busy while, not even just next year. Next year is going to be very busy because it's so narrowed. Like, this says busy, this says busy, this says busy, this says busy. So next year is going to be particularly busy, but it doesn't mean that next year is their only shot either. They are in a phase of like peak period in zodiacal releasing, which is going to last until 2025. They're in their secondary progressed gibbous into full moon. That's going to last like 6 years for them. So then they also have this peak period biannual perfection from the ascendant, which is going to last at least that birth year for them. So there's plenty of time to allow inspiration to find them, which again, Venus in Leo, right? Venus in Leo, this is exuberance. This is passion. Follow the fun. Follow what you feel drawn towards. Let that warmth kind of guide you in and see what surprises you when you kind of relax and let yourself express yourself as much as you can, especially with that being in the 1st house.
Yes. Now, for people who are not this client, like what would you say, like, for people who maybe just know their rising sign, they know their chart, and they don't quite understand how to like take their first steps into understanding how to work with this Venus retrograde, what advice would you give those people?
So my standard advice for Venus retrograde has been a lot of what I mentioned back when we were talking about the writer's strike is consider, if you can identify where Leo is on your chart, what house that is. Look up a couple keywords, make them make sense for you. They are archetypal. They are suggestions. You can work them into a sentence that actually makes sense in your life. If you have a keyword that you're like, oh, communication and connection and blah, blah, blah. In this, I had someone the other day that was going through Demetra George's Astrology for the Authentic Self.
Okay.
It's a great book. I highly recommend it. It's a pretty good book to be able to get into and sort of learn. Astrology for Yourself is an actual workbook that you can use that Demetra did in partnership with someone else. But it is in the relationships that seem to be coming up in my life right now, particularly since about June 17th or so. I think it was actually June 19th to be super specific. Yep, June 19th. Especially since then, relationships that have come up. How seen do you feel? How represented do you feel? How understood do you feel? How compassionate do you feel towards yourself, towards the other person? Are you expecting nothing more and nothing less from another person than for them to be exactly who they are? And are you giving yourself that same benefit? It's all about the unconditional relationship. And if there are conditions, you'll know, because it's the, wow, I wish you were this, and then we'd get along. I wish you could be this way, and then we'd get along. Instead of the, you are who you are, and I can totally accept that because you let me be who I am too. It's the relaxed relationship. things without chords and without strings.
Yeah. Now, when I talk to clients too, I this Venus retrograde. So we know that she goes retrograde. I'm hoping I'm not botching this. Every 18 months, but every 8 years in the same part of the sky.
She has an 8-year period.
Yeah. So, it was 2015 when she was last in this part of the chart. Do you have, by the way, do you know the dates of that retrograde?
I can find them actually super fast. Luna.
I always forget that. But for a lot of people, I've noticed that's something to keep in your mind too. If you don't know what you're working with, go back and think about what was going on in your life during that period, because there's likely, even if it takes some reflecting on, there's probably a story that's resurfacing for you.
Yeah. So in 2015, July 25th, she stationed retrograde. And let me pull this chart up. And that was her in 2015. She was actually, where are you, little one? Hang on. Sometimes my eyes, I'm going to quote our guide from Egypt, the ADHD. I don't know if everybody got to hear that on the bus, but it was really funny. She was in Virgo at that time. But I think she must have been finishing her, because I have direct January 31st, 2014. And if I look at that, we're actually seeing her at that time in Capricorn. So that was the repeat of the one that we had in 2021 of her.
Okay.
Thing. Sorry, this is how astrologers figure stuff out. My bad. It's taken a little bit of time.
Oh,
okay, so we look at July 25th. I think she started retrograde at 0 degrees Virgo and then retrograded back into Leo. And she finished on September 6th, which had her in Leo at 14.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, go back, think about, let's say, late summer, early fall of 2015, roughly, right? Is there a story?
This time period again? Same time of year. Yeah, same time of year.
Same time of year. So yeah, this time of year, 2015, is there a story that was coming up? A lot of times so far I've been talking to clients in the shadow, and it's been like, oh yeah, like maybe they're going through some relationship issue, and they're like, oh wait, I was in the same relationship issue with a different person. That's information to work with. Right? This is a really great time to go back and think about where we are now and go, do I have a pattern?
Yeah.
What is this pattern? Maybe I should stop spinning my wheels for 40 days and really think about how it might be a me problem.
Or it might be just a circumstances that comes up often, like this seems to happen a lot. I wonder why that is. And this also plays to Venus has, of course, we just said an 8-year period. So at the end of 8 years, on the, 7 years and 364 days, you get to the 8th year, she'll come back to where she was roughly when something started. And relationships tend to have what they call the 7-year itch. So in the 7th year, from achieving the 7th year into the living the 8th year, right? Because we work with this like we do with perfections. You live that 7-year itch. Well, we've been together for 7 years and 3 months or whatever. You're in that 8th year. And that's when Venus is coming up to her return. And you're getting that itch of, do I stay? Do I go? Do I commit? Do I change? So whatever was going on in 2015 around this time of year, are you getting sort of a 7-year itch? And what area of life might that be? And this is a fun way to reverse engineer. What area of life are you getting sort of the 7-year itch in? And then see if that actually is reflected by the sign of Leo in your chart, or to see like what Venus is retrograding through to give you that 7-year itch in.
Absolutely. And this could also just be a great time, in addition to looking at Leo, look at your natal Venus, right? And really get to know that story. Maybe Venus is really prominent for you. Maybe you have a strange relationship with Venus, right? These are all things that could, it's funny. We both have very different Venuses in our charts, which make us great for this conversation.
Yeah. It is really interesting because like my Venus is wrecked in almost every way that she can be. But we figure it out. We do whatever I think she actually is retrograde as well. And so we do the whole counterculture kind of Venus expression, and that's okay. So if you are someone that you notice, you're like, one of the quotes here was the rebellious streak that you can sometimes get, to rebel against culture or to go on strike, or you can see how like not to do the normal thing, to be the person like, as examples that I personally express, I don't wear makeup. I don't have the long, beautiful hair kind of thing. I am more androgynous and non-binary. So like Venus and I are not doing the Aphrodite thing. We're more over on the Athena thing. And that makes a lot of sense in my chart too. So just giving yourself permission to be your version of Venus, because my Venus is in Aries. That's Venus ruled by Mars. So of course we're going to have a different expression. And then you have Venus in Taurus, right?
Yeah, I'm Venus in Taurus, 10th house, right? She's angular. She's really like, she's very loud Venus. But it's also interesting to think about, like, I'll share mine. I'd love your answers to this question too. Like personally, when I think about the retrograde, one of the ways I personally work with is thinking about my relationship to my desire. And that can also really be digging into my natal Venus. And I think that we forget, I was just listening to the astrology podcast with Kira Sutherland. I always think I'm getting everyone's name wrong, on the astrology of health. And I was really, my ears perked when she was talking about how we can like way overdo the benefics, right? Because Venus is things, it can be jewelry, it can be, luxury, it can be sugar, it can be alcohol, it can be indulging in like rich fatty foods, right? Like Venus can overdo herself. And so like I'm thinking about this Venus retrograde and I'm thinking, okay, 40 days and 40 nights, I'm going to like clean out my relationship to Venus because she tends to go wild. So I'm going to give up sugar. I'm going to like give up like spending money on like strictly very like Venus's like very loud desires, right? And so that's a way for me to like dig into my relationship with Venus, but that's going to be different for everyone. So I'd love to know, like, when you think about your natal relationship with Venus, some of the ways you might be working with her.
So my natal Venus tends to be the one that like gives me the not necessarily most healthy image to work with. So Venus is in my cadence 6th house of health in Aries. And so she's, detriment, all the stuff. And so one of the things that I've noticed coming up for me, of course, is some health topics have been coming into my sphere that I'm carrying into this retrograde of like, how do I want this to do better? I've started, I've always been very on top of my nutrition, but now I'm on top of more like medically suggested things, as an individual. And I'm going to like list a word that you may not have heard of before, but Google it because awareness is awesome. As an individual with moya disease, it's very important for me to stay hydrated. It's very important for me to take just a single aspirin every day. I actually have, for the first time in my whole 33-year-old existence, I know why those things are now. So I got the reason why they're important. And now I'm like, oh, well, I can do that. Whereas from 10, when I had the surgery and was first told to do these things, until now, I was like, well, I'll just compensate in my own ways because nobody's telling me anything anyway. Now I know why, and I'm able to really give myself the support I need. So my focus for the next Venus retrograde is to nurture the relationships that are supportive of me as much as they support me. I want to support them back. So my partner, my business partner and I are actually going through this thing called conscious contracts. We're solidifying the contracts with our clients and things like that we work with in a larger scale. And we have someone who is not only a conscious contract lawyer, but they are also a professional mediator. So we're understanding if we actually do have conflict that seems like we can't overcome it, what are our steps to commit back to the relationship or to dissolve it if necessary? And that's been a really cool situation. So that's my project as well. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. And we see like two different examples here, right? In my case, there's a little bit of like drawing back, right, from Venus because she's loud. In your case, it's actually like bringing in extra support for yourself and those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and yours makes sense, right? Because she's transiting your first house. It's all about you, right? And you have this inclination of, how do I make it more about me? How do I understand me a little bit more? And that's allowed. Like it's not egocentric or anything like that. It's appropriate. Mine is 10th house. How am I thinking about the future? How am I thinking about long-term? How am I thinking about visibility? I'm also reworking my entire business model right now and making sure that it matches my energy and what I have to offer and how I can bring my best self forward, how I want to be seen. I'm actually using this Kazemi to launch my Modern School of Ancient Wisdom. So spoilers, but also keep an eye out for that.
That's beautiful. And she rules your 7th. So that's, and she rules my 10th too. So thinking about those things too, of also where she's going, but also like what she rules in the chart is going to bring up.
What purse is she carrying as she comes into the sign?
Love it. I have one of my mentorees is in a band. She's wonderful. I'm not even going to say it out loud. I'll put in the show notes because I'm going to mispronounce it. Actually, I'm going to try. The Doozers, like from Fraggle Rock.
Oh,
Are they
oh
Doozers
my
or
God, I'm going
Dozers?
to have that stuck in my head all day. That was my childhood, Fraggle Rock.
Are they Doozers or Dozers? I can't remember.
I think they were Doozers.
I think so too. Okay, so the Doozers. Anyways, wonderful band. I mean, shout out to Melanie. She's fabulous astrologer, and she personally is going through a lot of her art that she's collected over years, and like making a compilation, pardon me. And her band is going through like their album to kind of review before they launch after obviously the retrograde. So this could be a really beautiful idea, talking about is kind of building on what you said of going back and refining projects. So it doesn't have to be all hermit mode, right? We can really actively be working on reviewing things in our, art. There's a good one, right? Because it is Venus related.
Yeah. And oh gosh, if you don't know Fraggle Rock, look up the main theme song to Fraggle Rock, because it's really perfect for Venus retrograde actually too, because it's Let the Music Play, Worries for Another Day, like all of those things. And it's such a bop. So I highly recommend it.
Oh my God. And they're going down. And I think like, that's the thing too. Like the Doozers are like in the like underworld, but it's like, I feel like there are some underworld themes in Fraggle Rock too. I think we just stumbled upon, I think we stumbled upon Venus retrograde gold right now.
Yeah. So here's some suggestions for TV shows to binge watch while during Venus retrograde. I actually on Threads have recommended Jane the Virgin, because it's a Americanized telenovela but like, if you're also learning Spanish, it's beautiful because there's characters that speak exclusively in Spanish. You get a lot of cultural context for that kind of thing, but there's the whole thing about the love triangle and twists and turns and all this amazing stuff. Plus, it's just a really good show, like really well done, not so over the top that you don't get invested and can't relate to it. There's something that happens in it that makes me cry every time I remember it when I'm watching this show. I got so emotionally invested. So that one, but also for lighter ones, go and check out Fraggle Rock. I think they actually are reviving that too. So maybe jump on that train.
I've heard that. Yes. Okay, let's not do. Okay. I'm pulling up new slides. This is like a huge thing every time. Okay. So what is it? Jane the Virgin. Did I get that right? And Fraggle Rock. And then I was putting together notes. Which I won't read to everybody, but I'll put in the show notes. I was rereading, Sylvia Plath's Mad Girls love song. So if you really want to get into your Venus retrograde feels, go back and read some Sylvia Plath. Or not. But
I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind that.
I love Sylvia Plath very much, but she's required. Acquired taste, I should say. But I was just thinking, I'm like, that could be a little depressing. But moving forward,
Venus is retrograde. This is Inanna in the underworld, or this is Persephone in the underworld. These are the underworld Venus vibes. Let yourself experience that so that you can, because again, if everything is like a wave, we can go down there and then come back up. And if you're having a little bit much of Sylvia, go over to Fraggle Rock.
I love this. Okay, perfect. We have Sylvia Plath and Fraggle Rock. And Jane then, the Virgin. In between, we can do the Jane the Virgin and up our Spanish skills. Perfect.
So good.
So should we just, because we have a few minutes left, should we just like go through dates real quick with people?
Yeah. This is great.
I'll let you talk through it.
Okay. So for even more like insane context, let me bring in here. So if you're tracking this for yourself,
yes,
Venus came into Leo on June 5th. That's when you would have noticed Venus and Leo vibes for you. Venus entered her shadow phase the first time she covered the degrees that she will be retrograding over, June 19th. So that's when the theme of the story started coming up. We started getting a little hint of the plot. Venus will station retrograde on July 23rd. That is this Saturday from the recording of this, and likely from the posting of it as well. So July 23rd through September 4th, we're going to be rehashing that story. We're going to be covering those degrees one more time, kind of backwards. So going back and rewinding and getting to do it again. Then on September 4th until October 7th, she will be direct, and we will see the resolution, the final touch to these dates. And for reference in your chart, you're looking at the degrees between 12 degrees and 12 minutes of Leo,
Yep.
and 28 degrees and 35 minutes of Leo. Very specific. Anywhere between 12 degrees and 28, though, I would say is pretty close.
Yeah. And the Kazemi happens at 20 degrees Leo, and that's August 12th. And that's a day I would look out for, right? So a Kazemi is when Venus, it's like, I mean, it's the big moment for this retrograde. Essentially, it's what it's all about, right? So Venus joins the heart of the sun. We say that the impurities, we could say the old story is burned off, and then she begins to emerge. She's still retrograde at that point, but she's on her way to becoming a morning star. And so you might notice, like, maybe there's something like a little event that might feel actually really loud on that day. Something might be revealed, right? Maybe, you know, it's one of those days where in hindsight you go, oh, maybe there was like some key turning in that story happened on this day. So just bring awareness to August 12th.
Agreed.
Yay. And look at us doing great on time, even though hopefully
we took a bit of a stumble at the beginning, but I think it all worked out well in the end, which is so retrograde. So
dude, okay, that's a whole other, well, this is a great way of saying we are Ask Me Astros. You can ask us Astros, but we are Ask Me Astros, and we do this podcast once a month. But we also have our every Monday we do a coffee talk. So if it's not the recording of this, we do an IG live. So maybe next Monday we can talk about, oh my God, what has been going on with this today that feels very much like a Mercury retrograde. We can break that down along with answering any questions you have for us, which you can email at questions@askmeastros.com or just hop over to the website.
Yeah. If you hit askmeastros.com, there's a fun little button that does all the work for you.
Yes.
And again, if you are watching this, I don't know if you just said this, but you can use the code Leo AMA, all one word, all caps, on either of our websites to get 10% off of a consultation with us.
Yes, you can. And follow both of us. Crystalline, what are you these days? Where are the places for people to find you? Because there's a big one coming up.
So another part of my Venus retrograde situation is that my handle's all messed up because I thought I was being clever. So I went and I saved the handle I wanted to use which is going to be at Modern Ancient Wisdom.
Okay.
I went and I created a profile for it so that nobody else would take it. But then when I deleted it to change my main account over, it was like, by the way, you have to wait a month before you can use this. Great. So on TikTok, I am Modern Ancient Wisdom. On Instagram and Threads right now, I am still the real Crystalline, but will hopefully soon be Modern Ancient Wisdom. So it will soon be all the same, but right now, try both and see what you get.
And if you just Google Crystalline Vitovich, you'll find all your stuff. You're easy to find. So find Crystalline, follow you in all the places. You have some cool stuff coming up.
Yeah. So another interesting thing is this Wednesday, I don't know if anybody out there knows who John Edward is. He's a psychic medium that was really influential in my upbringing, but I'm part of his private app now as one of the admin astrologers. And I'm being interviewed on his Evolve show this week, which is really full circle. So I have to look back in like maybe 2 Venus cycles ago and see what was going on, because that is a throwback to my like origin story of mediumship.
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So everyone follow Crystalline, all the places, look out for that.
Yep.
I'm CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, and you can find me in all the places as Art of the Zodiac _. Nothing to speak of huge coming up right now. I'm putting up a bunch of stuff on my my YouTube. I'm going to be resuming my talks. I interview astrologers, artists, people who are doing things I find interesting. So follow me in all the places for that. And we will be with you again on IG Live next Monday. So have a beautiful day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.